Classic Mr. Rogers entry. It's Tuesday the 26th of September, and guess what? We have a couple of more days till the full moon. The camera hasn't quite come into focus. Let's give it a shot. Run it back. Run it forward. Oh, this camera is not particularly good at doing this kind of on-the-fly focusing. But anyway, there's the view. Going to the observatory on a moonlit night during the lunacy, and there's one reason why. I want to have a look at a couple of studies we already have images of, and we want to see just how bad the moon affects the real-time imaging. Now, I already know it affects visual astronomy. So what I've done is I set the scope up again to the standard parameters for the NGC catalog. And there it is, one of the studies right there. You might recognize it. Let me mount. So it's time to mount up the camera, and then we'll have a little bit of a tour. Not too much, maybe 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes max. Okay, let's seize the night. Alrighty then. We are at 128 flood, 42 decibels of auto gain control. On a beautiful night. The only reason I'm out here is because the sky looks so very good this afternoon and evening. Now, of course, you know what we're looking at here, right? Yeah, that's it. M27, the Dumbbell Nebula. Notice what we look for. We've been doing this all summer. Look for those frontiers, get a sense of the contrast, and get a sense of any detail in the imaging. You know, it's not bad. I wouldn't do the NGC catalog under these conditions because we want the best views possible. But hey, there's color in the Dumbbell. Now it's vertically overhead. So we are getting about the best view we could possibly get. And I would say that the M27 is about 40 degrees from the 11th day moon that I just showed you previously. So there's our view. Now let's pick out a few other studies. Now they're going to get, some of them are going to get very close to the moon, so they're really going to be seriously washed out. But here's that first look. Well, I'm hoping you might recognize this one if you've been following the series. Of course, the conditions aren't the best to see it. But actually, I'm kind of surprised at how good NGC 7331, Galaxy and Pegasus, looks. One of probably only 50 or 100, I have to do a count later on, galaxies that are brighter than magnitude 10.0. This one is 9.5. It's also quite large. 10.2 by 4.2 arc minutes. In fact, if we could see the full extent of it, which very few telescopes can, you'd have to have something like the Hubble telescope to see it. It would extend over half the field of this view we're getting through the TFT monitor, which is 15 by 20 arc minutes in size. Now, one thing I'm noticing about it is it's pretty. There's a bluish cast to everything, and all of that is quite visible in the sky to the eye because the moon is illuminating the atmosphere to a much fainter degree, of course, than the sun might, but it is kind of aesthetically attractive. So NGC 7331 is just about to enter the middle third of the sky and about as far from the moon as M27, the Dumbbell Nebula, was. So this galaxy is 46 million light years distant, plus 44.5 degrees. It's at hour 2237 in right ascension. Not bad. It's a pretty view. I just would not want to be capturing it for the NGC tour on a night like tonight because it would misrepresent the view. It just so happens that the next step in the NGC catalog up from 7331 is, of course, 7332. Another Galaxy and Pegasus. Fainter. So now we're at magnitude 11.1, smaller, 3.8 by 1.1 arc minutes. So we should see some extensions. It's a spiral of the lenticular class O, and I would describe it as being a sub a super edge-on type galaxy. It's a little bit more than edge-on, but at least the extensions are quite bright and visible on the screen. It's at 23 3/4 degrees right ascension, and we have moved towards the moon by about 5, maybe at the most 10 degrees. And that should reflect itself on the screen. I can see a serious amount of brightening towards the top of the display. Okay, skipped a couple here. What we have now is NGC 7335. This one's 2 magnitudes fainter than 7333. It's magnitude 13.4, but it's kind of 1.3 by 0.6 arc minutes. So it's basically a tilted spiral with a lowercase a. 287 million light years distance. So this one's pretty large, probably larger than our own galaxy, but smaller than Messier 31. It's at 34.5 degrees. We've just moved away from the moon, but it isn't that bright galaxy down there. It's a fainter galaxy up there at magnitude 13.4. And so I'm not sure what that other galaxy is. I suspect that's NGC 7331, frankly. And I could probably prove it by going back to 7331, but I just don't really want to do that right now. Let's see what else is in the catalog that we can look at. Okay, I'm continuing to push the magnitudinal scale. Now we're about a magnitude fainter. This is NGC 7337, another galaxy in Pegasus, very close to where we already are. And you can tell that because 7331 is right down towards the bottom of the screen. Although it's in a lower contrast region, it looks better to my eye than it looks on the camera screen. This is a magnitude 14.4 galaxy, 1 by 0.8, so it's it's a football shape, it's not a blade. It's a spiral with a large bar, lowercase ab, 307 million light years distant, so roughly about the size of our own galaxy, 100,000 light years across. It's at plus 34, almost a half degree, and we moved a little bit further from the moon in the darkest part, entering the middle third of the sky. I'll have to confirm it on the screen later on. But several galaxies now have 7331, 336, I believe it was, and 7 have proven to fall into the same field of view. This may be one of the last of the galaxies we're going to look at tonight. I do want to swing around on the ring and have a look at that, but I'll have to cause the scope to do an equatorial flip. This is NGC 7339 galaxy in Pegasus once again. Magnitude 12.2, but sub-oblate at 2.8 by 0.7 arc minutes. So it's giving a very nice vertical view on the screen. The interesting thing about it doesn't seem to have a very bright core. It blends nicely to the extremes, something I imagine our own galaxy would look like. It's magnitude 12.2, 2.8 by 0.7 arc minutes, spiral with a bar, lowercase bc, 59 million light years distant. So this is a fairly small galaxy. I would estimate it to be in the 15 to 20,000 light year in diameter range. It is closer to the moon than the previous studies. I will step through a bit more looking for something else of interest before we flip the scope and go to the ring and possibly Messier 56 globular cluster. Okay, now we're getting seriously swamped by the moon. In fact, it almost looks as bad as 10 degrees above the horizon. What we're going after here is a galaxy that's maybe 20 degrees from the moon, 2 fist widths extended, NGC 7344 galaxy in Aquarius. Magnitude 14, 1.5 by 0.8, oblately presented spiral with a lowercase ab, 326 million light years distance. So this baby is about as large as M31 at about 150,000 light years. It's minus 4 degrees and it's at hour 22:39. 36 seconds. So I'm not sure if it's anywhere on the screen, but certainly a magnitude 14 galaxy should show the core. Plus, given the fact that this is kind of an oblately presented galaxy, some sense of extension. But the moon is seriously harassing this view of the sky. So there we go. The closer you get to the moon, the more likely you're not going to see what you expect to see. Although we did have a pretty good view of NGC 7331 this evening against a pretty bluish sky. So let's flip it, go to Messier 57, the ring, and possibly Messier 56, and bid it a Carpe Noctem. So let's get a sense of how the Ring Nebula will look at various settings of exposure time with the moon about 60 degrees away. The ring itself is virtually overhead in the darkest part of the sky. These are settings that are roughly equivalent to a 6 or 7 inch telescope, and that's typically a 6 inch would be at 36 decibels. So it would lose maybe a half a magnitude to a little more than that. If we step up, now we've basically added 0.8 magnitudes to whatever it was, and that adds about half the aperture. So if we assume it was roughly a 6 inch scope, we're up to about 9, it's probably more like 10 right at this point. That's a pretty good view. Then we go to 64, and we're now getting a bit over bright. So once again, keep the aperture down when you keep the exposure time down when you have very bright high surface studies such as the Ring Nebula. Let me go ahead and boost it back up to the original setting, which is 128 flood, 42 decibels, so you can get a view there. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to navigate down, and we're going to return, and we're going to save the settings. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Come on. Like I have to learn this thing all over again every time it equatorially flips. Why won't it exit? And save. Okay, let's have a look at M56, the one globular cluster we're going to look at this evening. Okay, let's watch globular cluster Messier 56 start to stabilize on the screen. It's a globular cluster in Lyra, magnitude 8.3. Not the faintest. As a matter of fact, I discovered, I believe it was Messier 71 that was even greater. It was at magnitude 9.1 or 2. 56 is smallish, 5 arc minutes in size, but it's 32,900 light years distant, so more distant than the Great Hercules cluster. It's 30 degrees, almost virtually, about 10 degrees of being virtually straight overhead, so it's in the darkest part of the sky. That is our view under the lunacy. It'll be interesting to compare some previous views at the same settings in order to get an idea of how much moon wash is affecting the viewing of clusters. This, of course, is a globular cluster. It has, I think the moon has less effect on open clusters than globulars and nebula and galaxies in general. So if you do have to get out observing on a moonlit night, you do want to look at stars or planets or the moon itself if you're so intrigued. So there is our Carpe Noctem view of the evening, Messier 56, under a late second quarter moon, which will be full in a couple of days hence. Carpe Noctem.